Stephanie, happy belated birthday. How are you?
I am really well. I am 51. No.
Doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. You turned 50 yesterday. Doesn't mean you're 51 today. Yeah.
Yes, I am officially 50. 50 in one day.
You made it. I'm celebrating my 29th anniversary of my 21st birthday. So
Right.
I'm struggling from yesterday because I told the dad joke and nobody got it. So
I'm sorry, I didn't get it either.
You didn't get it either? That
No.
Somebody mailed a watermelon with food stamps? That doesn't... Okay, I guess nobody knows what a food stamp is.
Well,
You don't have food stamps
but
in Canada, so maybe I understand that, but no. All right, I guess it's that joke is just for me, which most of them are.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if it was resonant in your head, then I think it's great. I think it's a really nice joke.
Okay. All right, let's get the show started.
All right, let's get the show started. I was wondering, when you're a founder, what scenarios are you missing in your financial forecast? This is hoping and like praying that you do a financial forecast. There's a shocking stat that 73% of all startups fail due to poor financial planning. Notion's Ivan Zhao built 3 revenue scenarios before launching, and only the worst case one saved him. Today on How to Founder, we're going to be talking about financial forecasting and pro formas. I'm your host, Stephanie Hayes. This is my, let's say, wonderful co-host, Anthony.
Struggling for the right word there?
Yes, my amazing co-host, Anthony Franco. And we are talking today with our wonderful guest, Jon Morris. Jon, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much.
Jon transformed a $10,000 business plan win into Rise Interactive, scaling to $40 million before selling. Now at Fiscal Advocate, he empowers service companies with tech-enabled financial strategies that drive profitable growth without external capital. How are you doing, Jon?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here today.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. We like to talk about financial stuff because nobody wants to talk about financial stuff. It's always those sort of like little head in the sand moments. But let me just hit you with our first question. Why do single path financial forecasts doom founders to failure?
The reason why is because we all suck at predicting the future. And if you think about, what I always tell people is when you create a budget, the very next day it becomes obsolete. And so what you have to do is reforecast often. So you create your plan for the year. It's like, this is what our revenue is going to be. This is what our profit's going to be. These are the investments you're going to make. And the next day you win a client, you lose a client, an employee demands a raise, an employee quits. All those things go out of whack. And so generally, like if you get the scenario of, the 3 different scenarios of Notion, and it was the worst one that kept them alive, I generally recommend you start with a plan. But then you always have an unlocked version, meaning that you always have something that you are keeping up to date so that you really can manage your expenses intelligently. And so when your revenue comes in lower than you anticipated, you know instantly what your expenses need to be, where you need to cut, et cetera.
Yeah, there's that real balance, right, between, forecasting optimistically and forecasting realistically. And the problem with being too driven by what's happened is that we miss the opportunity to drive ourselves towards what we need to be. So how do you find that balance between that optimism bias and the reality bias, I guess?
So I have a lot of, I manage finance for a lot of companies, like 2 good examples are I have two companies. One is $5 million. Their goal is to be $6 million. The other one is $5 million, and the goal is to be $100 million. And so you can imagine with the one that wants to be $100 million, they want to invest big, and they put these really big, lofty goals, every year, and then they never achieve it. And so the biggest problem I find when people put lofty goals is that they spend money. And they're spending money of like, we're going to go from 5 million to 15 million this year, and therefore we're going to have to go spend all this crazy amount of money. And so what I generally recommend is, let's put the realistic plan together, but identify what investments you're going to make and how you're going to fund those investments that could potentially take you to the next level. And one of the things that I think is really important, no matter what industry you're in, is to understand the benchmarks. And what you want to do is you want to fund sales and marketing, and you want to fund innovation. And if you understand the benchmarks in each specific area, you can identify money that can help you fund those things, that can help fuel your growth.
Anthony, when you were building all of your 25 companies, where did you find was the gap between, what you were forecasting? What would you have done differently in terms of forecasting that might have helped, accelerate things faster or get you out of positions that were difficult?
So forecasting for me has always been essentially it like Jon said, it's creating a plan that's driven by the money, by cash flow. Essentially that's what it is for me. I went back and forth. So I have this really weird problem, and I'd love Jon to weigh in on if this is just a me thing or if it happens to all founders. But you said lofty goals equals, essentially you're going to be spending a lot of money that year. Yeah. And I've been there, and I've also been on the flip side of that, where you become so pessimistic that you're not willing to loosen the purse strings to do the things that you need to do to grow. And I go back and I'm very bipolar in that, where I become very paranoid and I become very optimistic. And I guess the forecast changes based on the mood, the personality that I am in the moment. And maybe that's me, but I'd love for you to weigh in on that kind of dichotomy of founders, especially entrepreneurial founders, that are both optimistic and paranoid at the same time.
Yep. And it's a very natural feeling, by the way.
Okay.
I think the first thing is, I always recommend a founder does soul searching of what type of business are they looking to create? Are they looking to create hyper growth? Are they looking to create, consistent growth? And some people, like using that one company I just mentioned that's 5 million and wants to go to 6 million, they're a lifestyle company. Like, they're making decent amount of money, they're making profits. They really don't care about growth. And it's not one of those scenarios where they're just saying that. Like, in this scenario, they legitimately don't want to add complexity to their life. They like how it is, and that's what they want. And so it starts off with just, who do you want to be as a CEO? And, to me, I want to do 20% consistent growth on an annual basis. Like, that's what I want to do. You double every 3.8 years if you grow at 20% a year consistently. That to me would be considered a great success in almost every business. And so if you're going to invest in growth, well, then you actually have to invest. And so what you can find is a balance. So I'm just going to use the service-based industry real quickly. A service-based industry should have a 50% gross margin. So that means after all your payroll, after all your freelancers, all your technology to service customers, you should have 50% left over. So if you're a $10 million company, you're going to spend $5 million taking care of your customers, and you have $5 million left over. Now, when companies start working with me, they're oftentimes in the 30% gross margin, the 40% gross margin. And so this is where I talked about understanding the benchmarks. Now, the next number that you need to know is I typically want a service-based company to have 20% EBITDA or profit. So that means that there's $10 million. I'm saying that you can actually invest in growth and put $2 million away in your pocket every single year if you know these benchmark numbers. What I oftentimes see happen is that companies will have a gross margin that is below the benchmark of their industry. And then they make no investments because they want to have profit. And so if you can expand your gross margin, and so let's just say you could go from 30% off of 10 million, which is 3 million to either put in your pocket or invest, to 50%, now you have an extra $2 million by going to a $5 million gross margin. And so just understanding how you can fund different areas. I'll give you one more stat. A typical service-based company, and when I say service-based, I mean like marketing firms, tech service firms, lawyers, architects, engineers.
Where your product is people. Your product is people.
Exactly.
That's
You're
what you mean,
selling
right?
time. Yep.
Yep.
So in that scenario, on average, your competitors spend 8% of their revenue on sales and marketing. Now, an average means half spend more and half spend less. I want you to be on the half more side, but I don't want you to give up your profits in the process. And so there are other buckets that you can pull from, such as if you can service your customers more profitably, or your back office. So HR, legal, corporate IT, general admin, legal is 15% of your revenue. If you could get that to be 12%, you can get an extra 3% into your sales and marketing. And so that's my balance that I recommend to people is make sure you understand how much you're spending in each bucket. There's not that many buckets. I'll just give them to you real quickly. So the first one is cost of service. That's to service your customers. Then you have sales and marketing, your back office, operations and finance, your executive team, which is like your CEO, your president, an executive assistant, any ancillary.
Management overhead.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then R&D, research and development. And so if you know the amounts that you're supposed to spend in each one of those areas, then you can be strategic about how do I invest in growth, not crush my profits, and at the same time, you can have a good balance.
Anthony, I know you're not a numbers person, but I was wondering if you knew how to make the number 7 even.
It was my understanding that there would be no math.
How do you make the number 7 even, Stephanie?
You take away the S. So, John,
That is very dad joke.
So, John, like some of these founders are building businesses that are intentionally high growth, right? Like very fast high growth. How can forecasting work to drive that higher growth environment when we're for all intents and purposes we're trying to strike that balance, right?
Yeah. So, a couple things. One, the longer your business has been around, the more data you have, the better you are going to be at strategic planning and forecasting. So, what you mentioned, my company was founded through University of Chicago's annual business plan competition. And I had to do a forecast and my numbers were so far off. And the professor actually, a few years after that business plan competition, they do it every year, started to do a study of what everyone predicted in that class that their financials would be, and then the actuals. And not surprisingly, it was like 500x more optimistic than what the reality was. But when you're starting out with no customers, no data, it's all just based on assumptions. I'm going to win this many customers a month, and I'm going to spend this much on sales and marketing, and this is what my cost per acquisition will be. And each year, you're going to start getting an idea of what is your cost per acquisition and how many customers you win. In the first half of this year, I won 7 clients, and I know what my cost per acquisition was. I know my break-even analysis. And I generally believe that the most recent past is the greatest indicator of the most recent future. I'll probably win 7 clients in the second half of this year. Now, if you want to change the math, then you got to change a variable, right? So if I want to win 14 clients as opposed to 7, but I'm going to do the exact same thing and I'm going to spend the exact same amount of money, I'm probably going to get the same outcome. And so I have to figure out, how am I going to fund sales and marketing, or how am I going to optimize what I already spent on sales and marketing to get a better outcome? Now at Rise, we would grow incrementally about $6 million every single year. And one year I doubled my sales and marketing. I went all out. I invested big. And what happened? The next year I did $6 million in incremental sales, and there was zero value to that investment. And so when you're forecasting, there's really two things you need to look at. The first thing is, are you funding growth appropriately? And by the way, there's only so many ways you can grow. You can win more clients, you can increase your average order value, you can reduce churn, or you can upsell more. I'm taking M&A off the table. M&A is another category, but those are the 4 drivers of growth. And so if you're going to invest in winning more clients, just because you invest doesn't mean you're going to get the right outcome.
Yeah, it's not just a variable on a spreadsheet.
Yep.
That's not it.
And so the next thing
sorry, John, didn't mean, yeah.
Oh, no worries. The next thing you need to really analyze is, there's the results, which is what you want, and then you have to really analyze in your forecast the activity. And are you getting the activity? Are you getting in front of the right people? Are you spending the money intelligently? I had a client of mine that was doing a great job of funding a lot of money, but their chief marketing officer was like way overpriced relative to their total marketing budget. So it was like 70% of their budget was their chief marketing officer. Yeah. And then 30% was dedicated to like driving leads. And I was like, well, I'm not surprised you're not getting leads, because, you're not optimizing your marketing spend intelligently.
That is, Stephanie, that happens a lot, doesn't it?
No.
That exact thing.
We were just actually I was talking about this with my partner yesterday. And, it's always that sort of, that balance, right? Like that little trade-off where, this client of hers had, a business was doing, good little 7 figures. And she had the opportunity to bring someone in that was going to cost her like $160 a year, but would probably net her like another $1 million in sales per year.
Yeah.
And she just couldn't get past it. She couldn't figure out how to get her head around making that investment. And therefore she said no. And, it wouldn't have been part of her forecast. It would have definitely, tumbled her forecasted numbers. But when do you absolutely live by those numbers? And when do you make decisions that are going to put those out of whack, but could potentially have, great returns? Like, what's the right time to decide that's going to be okay for me?
Look, at some point, here's my favorite part about business. We have to make black or white decisions with gray information, and the outcome is black or white, right? So if you use the example, your client had spent $160,000, which was not in their forecast and would have been a major investment and would have increased sales capacity dramatically. And so at some point, if they want to get to the next level, they could do incremental, be like, okay, you know what, I'm going to carve out $10,000 more, and I'm going to carve out $20,000. But when you're small, oftentimes you have to take a big stair step. With Rise, when we were 1 million in revenue, I was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 a year. And I literally had to make that exact decision. I hired a salesperson at probably like $125,000. So they were making more than me, and they were making more than my second in command. And we agreed that this was a big bet that we were willing to take. And by the way, like I showed this for years at Rise. Like I would show our growth curve like every single year, and I would have stars of bigger milestones. And there was a star from when I hired that salesperson. who is still at the company today. And I've been gone for 5 years, and they just crushed it. And so at some point, you're not, now hiring a salesperson's hard, so just because you're spending the money doesn't mean you're hiring the right salesperson. I hired probably 4 salespeople before that person, but they were my first big bet, and it paid off.
So, most founders are not, tied to their financials, right? And,
Yep.
Anthony's a great example of that. I still don't think he knows how to read a balance sheet, but, in my experience, founders are creative individuals, right? They have come into this role because they have some area of expertise. They have had a dream and what have you. And it's always like you're always fighting tooth and nail to have them understand their money and understand their financials. But it's always a stretch. Like it's not their most creative place to be, and it's not somewhere they like to be. And so how do we keep them engaged with their money? How do we keep them engaged in their financials and engaged in the process of planning on an ongoing basis, but not lose their creativity and not, help them understand what they're actually looking for and how it can be really strategic for them?
Well, you brought up first a good point of like, what is the job of the founder? Actually, to post on this either today or yesterday on LinkedIn, about at some point you have to make a decision. Are you going to be a great craftsman at like whatever you started your business to do, or are you going to be a great CEO? And you generally can't be both. And so, for example, my background before I started this company was digital marketing, and I was a great digital marketer. But at some point, I no longer did digital marketing. I was running a company, that just happened to do digital marketing. And the reason why I bring that up is having strong financial acumen is part of the job of being a CEO. And so if you want to do that job, I recommend that you start reading books and you get trained. Now, on the flip side, if you happen to not be a numbers person, I want to simplify it for people. There are only 3 KPIs that matter. And if you can just start thinking about your decision-making around those 3 KPIs, you might not need to know like every single detail of the balance sheet or the income statement. So I'm going to give you those 3 KPIs. The first one is how much cash you have relative to your monthly overhead. And so the more cash you have, the more optionality you have. And I'll give you 2 examples. Example number 1 is Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26.2 billion in an all-cash deal. That's what happens when you have lots and lots of cash. The second one is I like to think about most people, I'm assuming listening right now, if they went into a drugstore and they wanted to buy a candy bar, they could buy whatever candy bar they want. They could buy the king size candy bar. They could buy, Reese's peanut butter cups, which is what they should buy. But whatever choice they want, they can buy. I want, when you grow your cash, to switch candy bars with companies, that you could add M&A as a strategy to fuel your growth. So I'm a really big believer in cash and growing your cash. The second one is your profit margin. So if you can just look at one number on your income statement and you look at, how much profit you have and what % of your revenue was that profit, that's another really good indicator. In the service-based company, I want you at 20%. That's considered best of class. And then the third one is your growth rate. So how fast are you growing on a year-over-year basis? And so every decision you make should be focused on one of those 3 numbers. And so that would be for the creative person who's not good at numbers, just focus on those 3 numbers and the rest will fall into place.
Anthony, from your experience, I know those 3 numbers would still be hard. So as a founder, from your experience, like how rigorous do you think you need to be in those early stages?
In the early stages, you have to know where every cent is coming in. You have to account for every penny, especially in the early stages. You have to know where every dollar is coming in, and where every dollar is going out. You need to do monthly reviews with your accountant. If you're not doing the the AR and AP yourself, then you need to be doing it. You need to be reviewing it monthly with your accountant. Look, I've been there where I've kind of started to just like, it's taken care of, and I'm trusting folks, but then all of a sudden expenses go up that you're like, why are we spending this money? And it's really easy to impact your bottom line in the negative when you're not paying attention. So I think it's critical to know exactly where everything's coming in and coming out.
And how do you model that uncertainty? Because we've always got this element of uncertainty without, turning this into some, overblown analysis paralysis exercise.
You asking me or John?
Anyone who has an answer.
Go ahead, John.
So, I mean, that's why I always recommend reforecasting regularly and always having a version where you're keeping things up to date. We've, over this first 6 months of this year, had lots of uncertainty with trade wars and tariffs on and tariffs off. And I've seen a big impact in decision making. And I can't tell you, because I do a lot of strategic planning and advisory work, how many of my clients are like, John, I don't have an agenda today. I just need a therapy session. I can't close a deal to save my life. And so there's a lot of companies that were struggling with sales. And so, the only thing you can do is really have strong expense management and build your cash within those scenarios. Last thing, what I recommend for everyone listening is to think about what is the worst part of your job. In the service-based sector, the worst part of the job is that you have to fire people that you love and that you've been in the trenches with. And if you can't do that, you're going to struggle. But if you're managing uncertainty, you have to look at the data and you have to be able to make tough decisions to make sure that you're keeping yourself in good financial stewardship.
And I think there's that tension, right, between here's my optimistic number that I actually really want to work towards. And if I know it's there, I will find a way to make that happen versus, when you get too optimistic in your forecasting, then it just feels like you're always, swimming against the tide, and every month you come in under and blah, blah, blah. So there's a real, there's an emotional side of that too, when you're always seeing, these very optimistic numbers and you're just never meeting them because whatever external circumstances or who knows. I sort of see the gap there as the opportunity to, review strategy and to, break that into a sort of smaller pieces and say, here's the gap and here's the delta between those two numbers. What does it take to make that up? Whereas some people look at it and say, let's just do more conservative forecasting. And I feel like we lose something there, right? We lose the ability to envision and build a strategy that is actually more appropriate for higher growth. So
in my opinion, overly conservative forecasting is admitting defeat.
Yes, I totally agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Or fear. Like, I can't tell you how many people will put in no new business into their forecast. And I consider it gravy. I'll hear that comment all the time. I'm like, well, then cut your sales and marketing.
Yeah.
And, it's like, if you have zero faith in your sales and marketing that they'll bring any new business in, then you shouldn't spend the money in sales and marketing.
Right.
So my balance, Stephanie, is, look, the reality is you only have so much cash, right? So you can go to the capital markets, you can borrow money, but if you're not borrowing money and you're not going to the capital markets, you can only use the cash you have. And so what is important is to figure out how can you get as much of that cash towards investments that fuel growth. And so that's where I keep on talking about sales and marketing and innovation. You need to figure out how to fund it. And so if your revenue is down, like you thought you were going to do 20 million, but it looks like you're only going to do 17, that doesn't mean you stop investing, but it does mean you have less money to invest. So you have to figure out what are you going to cut so that you can continue to do those investments.
And if we're going for money, let's say we go to the capital markets and we get money. How does that change your approach to decision making and to forecasting once you've got that obligation under your belt?
it really, a couple things. One, private equity companies tend to outperform non-private equity companies. So having a board and being forced to do financial stewardship puts pressure on you. You know, like they're gonna challenge you when you spend money stupidly, and they're not gonna let you do it. And so, but what I'd also say is it sucks up a lot of time. Like, you know, raising money, let's just say 6 to 9 months of your time is raising money. That's 6 to 9 months that you're not selling. It's 6 to 9 months that you're not taking care of your customers, and you're leaning on other people to do so. And then afterwards, you have board meetings. You got to prepare for those board meetings. You know, there's work that comes along with that money. But what I would also say is when you have lots of money, sometimes that discipline of looking at every single penny gets lost. And so what you want to do is really make sure you keep that discipline so that you spend that money as intelligently as possible.
Yeah. And you see that even if you haven't gone for money, you see that with high growth companies that they start to feel like the money being there sort of, you know, it's almost like you take it for granted, and then you stop being quite as diligent. And I'm sure that there's a trade-off. You know, I have a client right now who just is obsessed with every last little penny. And I'm like, you are doing, you know, you are paralyzing the company with your processes that are required for you to be able to manage everything to that nth little dollar. So definitely there's some balance there. Anthony, any last questions for Jon before we move on to the speed run?
I'd love to get your perspective, Jon, on exactly what Stephanie said. This reliance on your forecast, and almost managing your business through your forecast versus manage your business through everything. Like, I know founders that will spend so much time on their forecast to get it absolutely perfect that they lose sight of what really matters in their business. And how do you strike that balance between forecasting and trying to predict every single thing, and just like being comfortable with the fact that, as you said, the first time you make a forecast, it's wrong, like the next day.
So generally what I recommend is when you think about your business, there are 4 things that you want to know. You want to know what your revenue is going to be, your profit's going to be, your cash is going to be, and what investments you're making in the company so that by the end of the year, your business is better than it was at the beginning of the year. Like, those are like the 4 things that I want you to think as a lens. So I agree, you know, like if you spend too much time forecasting that you're not working on the business, you know, then, you know, you're getting too far into the weeds. And so what you need to be thinking about is, you know, first of all, just, are you happy with the numbers? You know, if you're not happy with the numbers, you know, don't like go spend all your time forecasting everything perfectly. Figure out why you're unhappy. Is it because you're losing customers and you might have a product problem? Is it because you're not winning enough new business? You know, is it because you're not making any investments in the business so you can't grow? So to me, like, what forecast should tell you is if you're crushing it and you're way ahead, you're probably doing something right. If you're way behind, and let's just say you're also way behind your benchmarks within the industry, you're probably not doing something right. And so I just would use this as a guide to ask those questions. Like, what can I focus on that's going to help me make the business better, as opposed to just doing another projection?
I guess my question is this: how often do businesses fail because they suck at forecasting?
I mean, a lot. But it's mainly cash management issues. You know, a lot. I get 2 types of clients that are cash distressed, and clients that are hit a plateau and they don't know how to grow anymore. And a lot of the companies that are cash distressed, you know, they'll tell me that they had a CFO. You know, I mean, I had one company where the largest amount of money they were spending in the company was in the finance department, and they were losing a crazy amount of money. And, I would talk to the CEO and he's like, the CFO, everything's a black box. And somehow he miraculously figures out how to pay the bills, but he's doing it by racking up debt and racking up lines of credit. And, and so, if you don't know, like how to be profitable on a monthly basis, then you need an expert help you.
I think there's also an element here too, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I would say, without forecasting appropriately, I think you also lose a lot of opportunity, because from the other perspective, there's the optimistic forecasting, but then to me, your forecast determines your strategy. So it's that 10x is easier than 2x thing, right? So if I wanted to 10x my business, I would be focusing on much different strategies than I would be if I just wanted to 2x my business. So there's like an element of that where those businesses that are just not growing possibly are not forecasting in a way that allows them to, if you sit in front of me and you say, I want to make $4 million selling $40 products versus I want to make $4 million selling $400,000 products. Those are like two really different strategies, right? So I think the forecasting is about so much more than just guessing, because anyone who's reading a business plan knows that it's all fiction anyway. All they're looking for is that this business owner knows how to think about these things, right? But I do think that there's like strategic value of your forecasting that can determine what your strategy is, rather than just be a number on the paper. And I think that's what a lot of people end up doing.
I couldn't agree more. So one of the things I say always is everyone has a strategic plan, whether they know it or not. It is what they spend their money on. And, I'll give you an example. I'm investing very big in being guests on podcasts. In the last week, I think I've been between 5 and 7 interviews, on guests on other people's podcasts. I'm putting money and I'm putting time against it. And I don't have massive amounts of data, but I have good anecdotal data. I sent a proposal out yesterday because they heard me on a podcast. And so that is—
We're going to throw your bell curve way off, Jon. Sorry about that.
Sorry. Most people are offended when they listen to us, though.
So, I'm going to, based on what you just said, Anthony, I'm going to stop it completely. This is my last interview. No, but in all seriousness, like that is all I have is time and money. So if I'm choosing to spend my money on podcasts and I'm spending an hour with you right now, there's an hour I'm not spending with someone else. And I've, spent money on all sorts of things to help me get on other people's podcasts. And so that is, my strategic plan. And so you can learn, like I looked at someone's finances, like a $3 million marketing agency. They spent a crazy amount of money on gifts. And so they would gift their employees, they would gift their clients, they would gift prospective clients. Like you could just tell gifting was a really important part of their strategy. Whether it works or not, time will tell. But so you can look at somebody, and I gave you the example of looking at someone's marketing department and they were overspending on their head of marketing. And so they're going to get a low return off of that investment. They could spend that money more intelligently. And so the more that you can go analyze, like A, how do you fund innovation and growth? And then B, how do you assess whether you're spending it intelligently and you're getting a return? That's what I think of when I think of forecasting. So it's less about like, I'm going to win 50 new clients and it's going to be this big, and but it's more, is podcasting working? Am I getting leads from it? Do I want to invest and make it bigger? Do I want, my president to start getting on podcasts? So it's like, if it works for me, why wouldn't it work for him? And so I can start thinking about how you expand that as a channel that might be something that you could scale greatly.
Right. Well, now that we feel guilty for taking up your time and putting out your bell curve, are you ready to go to the speed round?
I don't know. I'm a little scared. Let's see how it goes.
Hey, just, let your soul leave your body and, just just dig into your intuition, super fast answers, no thinking. Let's do it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. All right. Speed round. Okay, Jon. 3 scenarios or 5?
3.
Monthly or quarterly updates?
Monthly.
Conservative or aggressive base case?
Realistic.
Excel or specialized software?
I build my own software. I have to say specialized software.
Okay. Internal team or external consultant?
I think you need to pick A players, and wherever you can get the A players is what you should hire.
All right. I love it. All right. Thank you so much for this conversation. Anthony, what did you take out of our conversation? We're going to do our founder fundamentals.
Yeah, so I started with budgets are always off because we suck at forecasting. So reforecast often. Lofty goals. I love this notion of lofty goals. It is basically giving your team permission to spend money. So be careful of those. Benchmarks for your industry is a good indication of the health of your business. So benchmarking yourself. It's not always it's not the end all be all data, but it is a good indication. The 4 things founders should measure: revenue, profit, cash, and investments. And then the last one I wrote was forecast are commitments, not predictions. So when you're writing your forecast, you're basically committing to it, not trying to guess what you're going to do. You're telling the business what you're committing to.
Awesome. I love it. So we had some deep dive resources. The Lean Startup, obviously one of the foundational books for founders. That is the book that kicked off my whole career inside of this space. There's another one, Financial Intelligence for Entrepreneurs, and the same authors also have a book called just Financial Intelligence, also a good one. Thinking Fast and Slow. We've talked about that book several times on this show. It is foundational part of your library. Go grab it. And then Financial Modeling and Valuation. I am just working on my Financial Modeling and Valuation Analyst certification. It is at times tedious, but also just that financial literacy and the ability to look at modeling and valuation. That's the sandbox I always stand on, is that if we know our target valuation years down the road, we can build a growth strategy that is aligned with that. So terrific discussion today, Jon. Where can we learn more about you?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post multiple times per week on strategic planning and finance management, mainly for the service sector. You can go to fiscaladvocate.com, and anyone can email me at jon@fiscaladvocate.com as well.
Amazing. I love it.
All right. Thank you all for listening. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, Steph.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please be sure to visit us on howtofounder.com, where you can connect with us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify channels. Steph, me, and Chris, and I'm going to guess Jon, all think that you founders are the pioneers of economic prosperity. And we're just really grateful for being with you along the way. Thank you, everybody. Bye.